Good evening, everyone. So now to give you all a quick brief about the genesis of this entire series of the webinar, how it's come to be, and the conceptualization of this particular platform. The webinar has been in series. We've already conducted 2 already successful webinars. This is the third in the edition, and the webinar has constantly been trying to understand, grapple, and answer the questions of a lot of doubts in companies and project managers or the facility heads about the strategies that we are we'll be implementing in the wake of the COVID outbreak, how the future of work is going to be changing. I mean, there's a big shift of how we were realizing the future of work in 2019 and to what it's going to be shaped today. And the webinar is being organized by the Commercial Design Magazine in collaboration with Wipro Lighting. Wipro Lighting in itself has been a company that has been the lighting solution and the evolution for this entire segment for over 25 years, with a keen focus on wellness, comfort, safety, and productivity. The company's product portfolio includes some internationally acclaimed design, cutting-edge technology, and innovation. With this, we would love to welcome all of you present here today to the webinar titled Adapting to the Next Normal and the New Dynamics in Workspace and Workforce. You've obviously got the entire list of what the questions we are going to be addressing and who our panelists are. But just to give you a quick gist as who we have on board, we have a beautifully diverse field of experts from different domains with us today. We have from the architect segments, we from the IFM segments, we have one from the project management segment, one from the tech segment, everyone together to understand the whole, the whole economy and the whole ecosystem of how a workspace functions. To moderate this panel, we have Mr. Deven Moza from Knight Frank. We also have Mr. Sander Shoop with us, who is the CEO for Mapic. We have with us Mr. Rajat Malhotra, the COO for IFM with JLL. We have Mr. Bimal Desai, who is the founder and principal architect at DSP Design Associates. We also have with us one more gentleman with us who unfortunately we had some tech problem and his camera wouldn't start. Technology issues we already were facing here. We have Mr. Praveen Vasudeva with us from Cisco. He would be here only on audio. Unfortunately, like I mentioned, his video is not working. He is heading the workspace as a director for workspace and workspace resources in Cisco. And it's really an humble pleasure and truly an appreciative gesture for all of these gentlemen to join us today for this webinar. And without much further ado, I'm going to hand this over to Deven to start off and take the stage on for the panel discussion here.
Thank you, Rashmi, for giving us this opportunity. I would like to start this session with a quote from Charles Darwin. It says, "It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It's the one that's most adaptable to change." Interesting time to position yourself. Think of survival of the quickest, then survival of the fittest. Adaptation is the key to business success in these changing times. The world is upside down, and sometimes it can be tough, really tough, if we're honest, to stay optimistic and maintain sanity. Questions are everywhere. What the future will hold? What will we learn? How will life continue to change? And what will be the new normal? As COVID-19 pandemic continues to unfold, there is unlikely to be a rapid or decisive transition from crisis to recovery. Organizations are more likely to face sequence of operational environments that oscillate between restriction and relaxation before a final end state relative normality. The coming challenge is one of building recovery through these likely changes in a way that safeguards the welfare of people while ensuring resilience and flexibility over 12 months or longer. Despite negative and positive business impacts from COVID-19, industry leaders find themselves in a situation where they have identified emergence of new patterns and opportunities amidst the crisis. Firstly, I'm privileged to be moderating this panel on adapting to the next normal and new dynamics of work. And I'm quite sure with the wealth of experience of all the panelists that bring to table, will have an interesting discussion and some great takeaways for the audience. So, Rashmi, you've already introduced the panelists. So we have Bimal Desai, DSP, we have Praveen Vasudev from Cisco, we have Rajat Malhotra from JLL, and we have Sander from Mapic Netherlands. I'll kick off the discussion asking questions that draw out some high-level themes and the idea we should be thinking about for next 45 minutes. And then I'll open up the chat box for 10 minutes for Q&A to give you an opportunity to ask specific questions that you've been thinking about to help you navigate the upcoming opportunities and challenges to be more successful in your business. So let's get started with the panel discussion. So my first question is for Rajat. How are organizations building resilience in preparation for the next normal? How are companies with large portfolio planning re-entry? And how are they planning their BCP considering large-scale impact of COVID-19?
Thank you so much, Devin, and I hope my audio is coming across clearly. I think the first example of adapting to the new normal is right here. We are having a virtual webinar and we have a virtual audience. And we're trying to establish a personal connect, through a virtual platform. So I think we're doing fine. Charles Darwin should be happy to see us doing fine. Devin, we're adapting ourselves well. So I think when you look at organizations building resilience, there are primarily three aspects, right? One is, of course, key to an organization are the people. Number two is what you do about workplace. And number three is what do you do about workplace operations or building operations? The stuff that keeps food on the table for me, right? And what I do for a living. So I think when it comes to people, I would like to segment this again into two. The first being organizations want to drive changes in behavior, right? So it could be changes in behavior of working from home, adapting to the new normal of working from home and remaining productive. And so it's not only managing people, but it's also leading people, and it's also for people to be working and remaining productive. The second bit is, since we are in the re-entry phase in the country and most of the world, is those changes in behavior are going to be very, very important for us to sustain in this new normal. It could be elements of social distancing. It could be elements of masking up. It could be elements of personal hygiene. It could be just being more sensitive to the current environment where we still have the COVID-19 virus threat looming over our heads. We are moving back because we can't afford to run this country from within the four walls of our homes. But we have to make changes in behavior to mitigate the risk to as low as reasonably achievable. So I think people are at the center of building resilience, right? Number two is, I think the whole workplace. How do you actually adapt the workplace and make it more resilient for the new normal or the new abnormal? Is, do we make changes to incorporate elements and tenets of social distancing? Do we change the way we use meeting rooms, for example? Do we change the way we serve food in cafeterias, right? Do we change the way we just utilize our washrooms? How do we actually ensure that people coming into the workplace are appropriately screened, right? Using technology is a big, big element of workplace operations plus also people. I think the third bit is about operating the buildings and operating the workspace, right? I think today, more than ever, the corporate real estate and the architect and the HR are really working together collaboratively to ensure that businesses are able to come back to work. We today, as a group, we have most definitely a seat in the boardroom, right? Where CEOs are consulting all of us to assure themselves that they will be able to resume business operations, right? So about building operations, there's so much which is being done as the pathophysiology of the virus has revealed itself, and so much of technology involved as well. It could be new regimens for operating ventilation and air conditioning systems. It could be the way we manage waste, for example. It could be setting up decontamination stations at locations within the facility where people can decontaminate their hands, they can dispose of masks. It's about the whole work around building operations to ensure resilience. So I think it's about people, it's about workplace, and it's about building operations. And it's about coming together as a community and assuring business leads and CEOs and business heads that, look, we have sort of figured it out and we can resume operations. We can never, look, there's never going to be a situation where you've mitigated a risk to zero. There's always going to be a risk, right? But you can mitigate it to as low as reasonably achievable. And I think as a community, once we do that, that's how we will build the resilience and assurance element.
So that's very insightful. Praveen, your thoughts on this? How is Cisco preparing itself for the next normal?
Hey, thanks, Devin. I hope all of you can hear me. It's a little shame that I can't come on video just due to some security and privacy issues. So sorry for that for the panel as well as for the entire audience. So Devin, I think a couple of things, right? I think while Rajat touched on how we are responding actually to the situation itself, right? And I think most of us have been successful in trying to ensure that we keep our facilities and especially our employees' health at the heart of everything that we do to ensure, safe working environments. But I think from a Cisco standpoint, we just took a step back and, looked at while we're responding, right? We're also reflecting upon what are the things that we really need to consider as, we look into the future, right? Reflect upon how actually the more important thing is how can work itself, change, because the pre-COVID eras there was always an unprecedented change in the way that the workplace was doing dramatic shifts, right? But this is going to be a leap in the chasm, right? While a lot of organizations had flexible working, but I think this is pushing a lot of businesses to think beyond what they were doing, right? And work from home has become a norm. So what it means is, work standpoint, looking at how the work itself is going to break down and what are the pieces of work that can really get pushed back to working from remote, right? And what are the things that really needs resident population to be there, right? And flexible workplace to be there. So that's the one that we are reflecting on to ensure from a business resiliency point, in the sense of how can we serve our customer, how can we serve our clients? That's the most important fact from a resiliency for us, right? How do you serve your customers? How do you serve governments? So that's where we are reflecting on. And then once we identify how personas have changed and how work itself has changed, then we will look at how do we reimagine all of this together. And then when we rebound, right? Rebound is, I have this, rubber band analogy, right? When you stretch a rubber band and, you let it loose, right? It'll come back to a particular form. It's not going to be the same form that it was. So we are actually in that stage to identify how are we going to really respond. And we are going through several iterations of how, business is going to change at the moment, Devin. So it's all internalizing at the moment. But to your point, it's going to change. And, we as an organization are trying to be resilient to serve our customers.
What is that Cisco is doing in terms of business continuity plan? So if there is another lockdown or if there is another wave of this pandemic, once we cross the peak, like we're witnessing that in China. So what is that resilience we're building if this happens again?
See, I think the fundamental is how do we digitize technology transformation that you do through your work itself, right? And I'm just keeping the physical aspect aside, which is, the corporate real estate. But I think fundamentally looking at the work process, the work itself, and how much of it can be completely digitized and how much can you push from working from anywhere and working from home is the fundamental. Fortunately for us, we had thought through this, not the pandemic, but we had thought through this of how we can move to working flexibly. And for our advantage, we had our own tools and technologies which helped us. So if you look at Cisco at the moment, I think except for 6 countries, we are literally working from home and serving our customers, right? And this has helped us primarily through the secure intelligent platform or the digital business architecture that we created on how we consume applications through clouds, how could we reinvent network, and how can we unlock a lot of data from that while being secure through the platform itself. So that has helped us, and we will start looking at it a lot more in terms of how you actually digitally transform the work and push it remotely. So that's where the thought process is, and pushing close to about, the thought is how much can you push it and how much needs resident population to enjoy innovation and collaboration, because you still need to win the war for talent, right? While you still need to look at, optimizing your portfolio, because today I think everybody is looking at how to secure, between the top line and the bottom line, and still continue to have that engagement and productivity, which is really needed to be successful in an organization. And more importantly, sorry, I'm just touching this, but how do we ensure that we keep the culture and the connection of the organization is becoming essential? And these are the things that we are working at the moment, Devin.
Thanks, Praveen. Talking about technology, my next question is to Sander. Will COVID-19 result in acceleration of automation, and how organizations prepare themselves to adapt to this shift? And how much of IoT and automation platforms do we see getting adopted by enterprises, which can transform the workplace into smart workplace environment?
Thank you very much for the question. I'm a founder and CEO of Mapping. We have a smart office platform that we've been building now for 6 years and implementing for big companies like PricewaterhouseCoopers, KPMG, Heineken, Microsoft. And what we sell is that we are very much working on offices that are working on a transition towards activity-based working and agile work. And the main driver prior to was really about reducing housing costs and making the office more like meeting space than a workplace. So in short, what we've been doing now for 6 years is really helping clients with smart office technology to get an attractive workplace that is also efficient. So really based on activity-based working and agile working. And a lot of what we see now is that the role of the office has changed, because people can see that they can work from home. A lot of organizations that previously thought we really need the office and we really need a workplace per FTE, they can now shift this and think, okay, what's the new role of the office? And to me, it's clear that this is really important. So like it's key to keep the culture there and to connect and to share value. So the office has a really important place in that. The only thing is, how much space do we need, and can we optimize it, and can we get back to the office safely? And I think that's really where technology can play a key role in making sure that there aren't too many people in an office. We developed a product to allow people to make a reservation. I want to come to the office on Tuesdays. So you know for sure that there aren't too many people in the office. Smart cleaning, so you can optimize the cleaning and be sure that you're using a desk that has been cleaned. So to me, but of course, it's my business, but to me, it's clear that technology is really becoming business critical in these new times.
Thanks, Sander. Bimal, quickly to you. How has changed because of this impact, and how are you adapting to new norms with IoT?
Hi, Devin. Can you guys hear me loud and clear?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thanks, Devin. Devin, Sanders has just pinpointed to a very relevant part in terms of what he's doing in terms of the space utilizations and the technology coming into workplace environments. But if I take a more broader perspective here, and your question is very relevant here, but we kind of at DSP saw this coming in terms of digital transformations applicable to real estate probably 2 or 3 years ago. And a lot of forums in terms of property technology have been kind of putting out subjects of how do we start integrating technology with the work environment from a base build perspective as well as from an interior perspective. And there has been many progressive companies which took the early dive into the aspects of integrating technology into workspaces. Cisco is one of them, Microsoft is another, which is a client for Sanders too. But coming to this present time, the way we look at it is, and this is purely because we have a integrated global team within our business, which does consulting advisory on smart building solutions, practices from a base building part to an interiors part. And this whole pandemic which has happened is being looked as more as a catalyst from our perspective as a lens, and this will hasten the speed of adoption of digital transformation strategies right across the real estate spectrum, whether it is at a master planning level, or whether it is at a base build level, or whether it is at an corporate interior level. And we will not just be addressing the parts which we were addressing earlier from the perspective of energy optimization or well-being or creating better experiences at workplace, or from a FM perspective, looking at aspects like fault detection, diagnostics, and predictive maintenance. But all of a sudden now, many public health use cases, and a simplest example of it is, how do I give a touchless experience to my employee or to my person who's visiting my campus or a building? As simple as that. So the priorities are going to change. Those companies who had already adopted smart use cases, intelligent use cases from an energy optimization, space optimization, efficiency perspective, they will move forward and adopt those ones for the public health use cases also very quickly. But it is time now, right as we see as architects and interior designers, to start viewing all our strategies from the perspective of the lens of technology. And how we put it is technology integrated design strategy for work environments. That's the approach we need to migrate to. And in terms of your question about rate of adoption, those who are mature and forward-looking companies with vision, they will probably move much faster and at a brisk pace to integrate all this. But those companies who are just entering this field and adoptions of property technology and IoT solutions, probably they are going to jump some of the things which the earlier companies did. And the simple things like energy optimization, well-being might be jumped, and they might go into more sophisticated parts, like how it happened when India adopted the cell phone technology. We jumped a few generations and moved into some other parts, those who did not have. So they are going to be kind of moving forward and addressing the well-being experience part of it first through the lens of technology, the experience part of it, which would cater to creating a trust and a confidence for the employees to come back to the workspace. And probably then they might go back and look at the energy optimization, fault detection, diagnostics, predictive maintenance, those aspects. So the shuffling of the order is going to happen. But it is a no-brainer. Most of the companies who have learned any kind of lessons in this time are going to jump into the bandwagon of adopting technology into the work environments.
Thanks, Vimal. My next question is to Rajat. There has to be large costs to ensure that appropriate technology is implemented to ensure security for work from home. And this will require higher budgets. How can these be routed to management and make them understand the long-term benefits? Or on the other hand, how can this be achieved with the shoestring budgets? How are companies efficiently planning their current transition and preparing for future?
So I think while both Devin and Sander have spoken about technology and its presence in the workspace, I think Praveen spoke about how well Cisco has been prepared for the work from home normal. In terms of the systems that they have, the tools and the platforms that they have that enable virtual working, right? And that's what has enabled these organizations to continue serving their customers and clients. So I think if you keep that as the true north, the continuity of business in new environments and new operating environments. Now, who would have thought that where you were always dabbling between 2 to 3% of workforce working from home, you suddenly had to move to 90% of people working from home, right? And those who had systems in place to enable this and enable it productively are actually sitting back and taking and reaping the full benefit, right? We saw initial reports that said that actually productivity has gone up, isn't it? So I think it's about the business case, right? So if we have a business case which supports technology enabling a new work environment, then I think it's beyond debate as well, right? You put it in front of the CFO and he's going to bring out the dollars, because in this current environment, to stay afloat, businesses like us and like Cisco have to be able to serve clients and customers. And the only way that we can do it effectively is through use of technology, right? And that's what we are doing currently. So I think there's a business case there. Also, just to build upon what Vimal and Sander so articulately put, is look, when you look at IoT, I'll give you an example. Who would have thought we would be in a situation where I have no workforce now to send to sites to do plant preventative maintenance? We are struggling, right? I'm in the business of operating buildings. And in the past 4 months, I've not been able to comply to more than 40% of plant preventative maintenance. Whereas I have clients like Cisco and other companies coming to me and telling me they need assurance on 100% business uptime, right? What's the effective way of doing this? It's through technology. If I have an IoT-enabled command center, and where we've implemented it, we have our own product, where we've implemented it, we're actually in a comfortable position because I have predictive analytics telling me what the health of the equipment is. I have energy data coming to me and telling me what's the loading on that equipment. And I'm now being able to take a conscious call of spacing out my maintenance for the equipment which I'm monitoring remotely. Right? I'm not able to do that for the other equipment because I'm blindsided. The client is still expecting me, and the IT teams are still expecting me to maintain 100% uptime. So I think the business case has to be there. And in my view, the business case, if nothing else, this current situation has shown us how easy and how absolutely crystal clear the business case around technology can be.
So Sanders, how are you helping your clients through this transition and preparing them for the future of technology?
Yeah, and I think the budget question is also really relevant. So how much does all this cost? We have a number of clients that said, okay, people can work from home, so can we really reduce housing significantly? So maybe shut down a few offices and have people work more from home. That's an immense business case if you can do that. But what's the cost of that in terms of maybe productivity? It's really hard to build a business case around productivity. But in our ideas, if people feel good, they perform great. So, and the office can play a key role in that and making really an organization work better. And that is something that is hard to put a price tag on, but to me, it's really there. The second business case are really about optimization of real estate. And that's something we've been doing for years. And it's really about censoring the workplace using occupancy analytics to get insight in the housing demand of the organization, make fact-based decisions based on data, and maybe hire something extra, stop hiring something. And there's a significant business case in that, and that's to me solid. The second point I want to address is what's the cost of doing nothing. I think security and privacy, and especially data security, is super important. So not specifically based on smart office technology, but also in the work from home. You want the data to be safe. You want people to have sufficient privacy, and the cost of doing nothing there are immense. So that's a totally different case to me, but it's really sort of like a boundary condition. If people work from home, it should be done using the right types of tools.
Devin, I would like to add in here to just what Sanders said and what Rajat said. From a cost perspective, when you ask this question, and I'll just pick up from where Sanders left, a simplest thing in terms of space optimization tool, and then he talked about putting sensors. So we have had clients where we have actually, even before you reach a design stage or a program stage of a project, usually what happens is clients comes to us and say, this is our program, and can you design an office space for, say, 1,000 people? But actually, if you kind of use these tools in a more efficient way and say that, okay, we would like to do some space utilization studies in your existing portfolio first. And I see that getting applicable more and more as we walk into the future from this part too. And we spend that initial 2 months on studying the patterns, usages of the existing office, and put down the data and the analytics on the table. You will be surprised to see that whatever desk, even if we are planning for 1,000, only probably 60% of those desks, it's a proven data, we have a lot of studies on this, are actually utilized effectively. So that means there is a real estate enough worth almost 40%, which is going underutilized or inefficiently utilized. And the question to us would be, how do we put that to better use as we walk into the future of the workplaces? And how do we start seeing that in tandem with work from home policies? And how do we utilize that additional real estate more efficiently? If you do that kind of a design approach to the programming and your layouts and your work environments, it will pay by itself. There's no question of kind of having additional capital investment, because you will see so much of efficiency brought on the real estate front. It is the CFOs and the CEOs and the CTOs will see a lot of value in it.
That leads to the next question I have, for Praveen. With this work from home, most of the employees are eager to return to work, though it's worked successfully for a lot of companies. And we spoke about efficiencies, higher efficiencies achieved. I think it's mainly because there were no distractions. We were confined to four walls of our house. We had nowhere to go but to work. But what needs to be seen is once we get back to a new normal, how effective that work from home would be. So many employees, like in our own company, they were eager to return to work, but at the same time, they were worried about the safety. So how is Cisco ensuring the employees about the safety and health and hygiene and motivate them post-lockdown world? And what are the post-pandemic planning framework for strategic decisions that can aid workforce and the workplace so that they feel comfortable, they feel safe, and at the same time, they socialize, they meet people, because we've been confined for almost 90 days at our home. So people would like to socialize, people would like to collaborate. So how is Cisco managing that?
Yeah, true. I think, this pandemic is, fragmented us from a, social interaction perspective in the way that we used to do. But, good that, we had technology which could bring in some semblance, trying to get the belonging through conference and video chats, what we're doing, right? So that's helped. See, the point is, I think work itself, I think we need to alienate this from the physical part itself. So work for me is three-dimensional, right? One is the physical work itself. Then you have the digital aspect, right? Which is like a platform which connects work. And then you have the policies and processes around it. When I mean policies and processes, I mean the HR component of it, right? Because as you transition people to work remotely, right, these three elements need to tie in very well. You can't just ask employees to work remotely, and if you don't have the right elements associated with policies associated with it, it's going to fail. As people work remotely, there could be different structures of, in a sense of, how are you managing physical well-being? How are you managing, wellness of an employee, right? Mental mindfulness and all that. So these are important elements that the policy needs to tie. And between this and this, what is the technology transformation you're doing to ensure that you are successful with this? See, this is where the thinking that I have, because these three things need to, integrate and get hip-locked very well to be successful. Because what's happening is the cultural connections will start losing if there is a certain percentage who's working from home. So how do you cater to the cultural and connection centers or transport hubs, whatever you call them, right? With the resident population, because you still need to have innovation, you still need to get the work done, right? So it's important that when you transition to a work from home or a remote work, rather not work from home, remote work is not like, something that you work once a week or twice a week. It's going to be permanent for a longer period. And these, employees will come in probably once in a month or even once in 3 months. So it is essential on trying to get that cultural connection to the resident population and create these hubs through the flexible settings that we need to have in the physical environment as people come in. So that is one aspect. The second aspect, which I touched on earlier, is, the work itself. Identifying what elements of work that can be moved and what elements of work that can still, stay on in the physical environment itself. So that is how our thinking is at the moment. And we are interacting with the, several functions of identifying what it means for them, because it means very different for an engineering organization. It means very different for an ops organization. It's very different for a customer facing organization and stuff, right? So each organization is very different. So coming back, so that's one element. Now coming back to your point of how are we going to ensure, confidence of employees when they come back physically. So as we respond to this pandemic in the present scenario, we're trying to do this in a very methodical way of not trying to bring large populations and try and test it out. So we're trying to test this out with a smaller population through education and obviously, everything related to physical aspects of, how as an employee comes in, what are the things that really need to take to be taken care of, from temperature readings and, stuff, which I think is the easiest part, in the sense that, we know what to do there, right? The second part is actually the contributions from the employees as well, in the sense of responsibilities of employees, because it's just not the responsibility of the corporate real estate function, but employees also need to adhere to this. So there becomes a communication and an education session or around, how actually when you come back, you start need to using the workspace itself. We can talk about, how much physical distance you need to be there between your desks and all that. There are certain things you have to make it very evident in the physical environment itself, so that people start changing that behavior based on certain predefined settings that you create in the work environment. And that becomes essential. So once you start setting those things, and then you see how, you can increase the population, whether it's cafe service, whether you give a transport service, whether you talk about, the reception service, beverage service, all that needs to, once it's taken care, rather in terms of how you handle it, once the confidence is there between how we are operating and how the employees feel, then we can always, look at increasing the density. In a sense, when I mean density, the percentage of population that we can get in. And the flip side is, hey, what happens if there is another wave of it? How are we going to deal with it, right? It's not easy like, hey, you get in, 5% of the population and in 2 weeks you ask them to go back, right? You have to be very conscious about how you really look at what's happening in the external environment.
DC to AC, and it's before Corona to after Corona. And not before Christ to after Christ. What we are looking at is the way the offices have evolved. And then if I look at the date line up till March, beginning of March, and we rewind back to the last 5-7 years, if you kind of carefully observe the way the workplace strategies has and the workplace environments has evolved, is because of the 2-3 very necessary impacting parameters, like the way the work was being done changed from a more hierarchical manner to a more team-based working environment. And that had an impact on the way the workspaces are designed. The second most important parameter was the shift of demographics, which we all talk about all the time, from a millennial to a Gen Z, etc. And that impacted the way the workspaces were designed. And the least and the last and the most important part is the way technology impacts the workplace design. And the way we start using technology and how do we start changing that. So all this impacted the way workspaces evolved, from the corner cabin to the cubicle, to the agile, to the activity-based working, and to various other kind of settings. Now, all that which has happened as a part of this evaluation is not going to die down and go away all of a sudden, or take a 180-degree turn and go away. What we need to do as designers is, yes, there are learnings from this current pandemic from a public health use cases awareness perspective, from a hygiene sanitization perspective. Another parameter coming into the design to evaluate is the work from home strategies. And we need to really dive into deeper part of that how are companies looking at it? Yes, it is a success in this last 3 months, but can businesses actually move to work from home certain part of their work? How much percentage? Which business division? Does the government law allows that to happen? What are the kind of infrastructure which we need to provide, or organization need to provide to the people to work from home? Those will also have to come into the picture when we design the offices for future. And looking at all this, if I kind of forecast into the future, what is coming out very evidently from our perspective is people first approach. And that has also to do with the well-being, wellness, experience, resilience, as I've heard here, and people plus work environment plus technology kind of approach going forward. And what we are doing today is we are redefining the framework as how an ideal design should be approached when I look at the new projects into the future. And what I mean by redesigning the framework is the questions will have to go back to the organizational vision level first, because a lot of organizations, most of us, have had certain kind of learnings during this pandemic, which were brought in front of us. And then that leads to the questions in terms of organization culture and people's study. What we are also saying is we need to do psychological profiling of the people, and it also comes from the perspective of addressing the issues of future resilience. Also, it needs to address the perspective of inclusivity and diversity. So that is the second layer which we need to revisit. And the third layer would be we start diving into the workplace typologies. What are the new workplace typologies we need to evolve? And from there, we move into the workplace environment as a I working space redefining. So there will be questions which will come on the table that is desking of so and so size the right size for me? Or do I migrate to a little different size of desking which gives me more physical space for the people to kind of have that kind of confidence and trust? And all this will be tied up by the thread of technology, as I said earlier. So the whole framework, the whole process will also change the way we address the future of workspaces. And it is going to happen that some portion of the people are going to shift to work from home. And that much of real estate, if it can be redeployed to give more space to people. So the approach of packing maximum people per square foot as a density approach, which is driven by the business, will change. And probably we might say that, okay, if I'm doing 100 square feet per person, can I look at providing 120 square feet per person? And that additional is not additional to the real estate, but yes, that will be kind of juggled between some portion of the work moving to work from home. So there are various strategies in which we are looking at. Early days to look at it, but this is the direction in which we are thinking.
Thanks, Bimal. Now I think I'll move to the Q&A part, and before that, I just like to share another quote with you, which is from a 20th century British explorer, Ernst Shackleton. Optimism is true moral courage. Optimism and courage, these qualities are needed more than ever as leaders make the decision that will shape the next norm. So I'll quickly go to the Q&A. Trying to
hello.
Help me with
yes. Yeah, so thank you firstly, gentlemen. Thank you so much for getting in all the points that we've discussed, and that's been important addressing. We have quite a bunch of questions that are there. I'm pretty sure even y'all can go through it. What we can do is we'll take some of the important questions and we'll try to answer them now, since we have just 10 minutes in our hands right now. Some of the questions are addressed to some of the panels in specific. Or what I could like to tell the audience is that even though we might not be able to run through all the questions, what we can do is we can share the questions with the speakers even after this particular webinar. And if the speakers can probably share the replies on the mail, we can share it with the audience, like, in the post-webinar mails that go out to them. So to start off with the first questions that are coming in from us. All right, this is for you, Bimal, the first question that's going in. It says, do you see aspects from healthcare design coming into workspace design now? Do you see, since obviously containment is one of the biggest criteria for workspaces, I'm pretty sure even the other speakers can take it, but this has been directed towards you, Bimal. So you have any answers to that?
Yeah, Rashmi, if I heard you right, your voice broke up in between. Can you just repeat that question, please?
All right. So what the question says is, do you see aspects from healthcare design coming into workspace design in the post-COVID era? Given that containment is such an important part in offices today, what is your opinion about that?
Yes, I'll take this in two parts, and then to address the immediate part, which the person has raised a question is, yes, from a perspective of awareness of perceivable sanitization, and I'm using the word perceivable because when you enter a healthcare facility, you perceive the sanitization which is there, and therefore it builds up your trust and confidence into the physical environment which you walk in. So from those perspectives, the company will have to kind of up their ante and demonstrate perceivable sanitization and awareness in terms of even not just day-to-day maintenance, but even from the design perspective. And what I mean by the design perspective is the choice of the materials which we do for the future. We'll have to be a little conscious about what we use as materials in certain areas where there is a lot of touch feel happening on a more regular basis. which gives that
Absolutely.
trust and confidence to the people. Also, from the
Absolutely.
perspective of technology, as I said earlier, there are a lot of technologies which healthcare environment uses in terms of
Okay.
sanitization. And from a perspective, one simple thing would be from a MEP perspective.
Okay.
There is use of UVC rays, which is used to clean up the site. Some of those
Correct.
kind of things, organizations will start getting conscious and come from again from an environmental perspective. Also, it will help us if we adopt those
Okay.
standards into the workplace, which will result
Okay.
into additional well-being for the people.
All right. Okay. Okay. Anyone else would want to add anything to this particular point?
So I think this is Rajat here, and from what Vimal spoke about MEP, it's interesting, right? We've been always now gravitating towards wellness and well-being. And when you look at just filter upgrades and the conversations we've been having, look, I don't want to
Correct.
paint a wrong picture in front of the audience. HVAC transmission of COVID-19 is not considered a major and a primary source of transmission. But filter upgrades is something that all of us are probably likely to do to just imagine MERV 13 and above. And what that will do is it will just improve the indoor air quality, right? Because
All
the
right.
particulate contamination will go down. And we already have
Okay.
some devices that we're seeing coming into the office space, which typically are there in the healthcare sector, right? You look at baggage sanitization using UV, hand sanitization. All of us are moving around wearing masks, right? It's like entering
Correct.
an operation theater, isn't it? So yeah, so I'm
Absolutely.
sure. Yeah, so I'm sure
Uh,
there will be impacts on workplace design, which will
all
change from
right.
healthcare. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Rafi, can I also add a short thing, because it's really funny, because one of the big
Uh-huh.
differences between an office and a hospital is really that in a hospital you typically make an appointment to go there, right?
Correct. Yes.
In an
Yes.
office, it's sort of like a beehive, and people can go in and out whenever they want. And one of the
Absolutely.
products we developed was actually to make appointments to come to the office. So you get like
Oh,
1 or 2 credits. You can come to the office 1 or 2 times per week, but you do have to
okay.
make a presentation to the office. So it's really heavy.
All right. Okay. That's
I
pretty interesting.
There will be a lot of incorporation of biophilic design, biophilia in the design. We
Absolutely. Yeah.
will have, when we spoke about, the air changes, we spoke about the fresh air part. I think in terms of, and Bimal, correct me if I'm wrong, now we don't have, the designs would change. We won't have glass boxes, we'll have operable windows to bring fresh air in. Uh,
Absolutely.
uh,
Absolutely.
not
Absolutely right, Devin. And
you'll replicate
it's
hospitals
just a gen.
office. But yes, there would be a lot of elements which would be used, which are used in healthcare.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Just a thought
Uh,
on that. Just where touching on what Bimal mentioned, I think as post COVID, I think we need to really understand the journey of an employee in the physical environment, right?
okay.
The way that
Correct. Yes. Yes.
we had pre-COVID is going to change the way that post-COVID is. But it's good for newer buildings or newer setups that are coming up, so you can
Hmm.
understand the newer journey and newer path that employees take through. But with some of them,
Correct.
we really need to rethink on how we can retrofit a lot of these stuff into the physical environment.
Absolutely, absolutely. This is another interesting question that we have coming up next. I'm pretty sure a lot of companies are grappling with this too. Probably Sander and Praveen, if you can probably take this, it would be really great. This says, how do you carry out space utilization studies in offices, given that full space capacity is obviously not an option? So now, going back to office, how is full density, what do you say, potential can be achieved with minimum, requirements that we have for COVID right now? So how is office space utilization going to be calculated and devised for workspaces?
Yeah, can I take that one? So it's
Yeah, sure.
um,
Yeah.
it's super interesting, because our data science team developed a new product that we can, based on the floor plans of a building with all the
Okay.
workplaces, we made an optimization that calculated at times which desks you need to close. So, and that's typically
Okay.
around 40-50% of the desks you need to close for a social distance of, let's say, 1.5 meters. So if you
Okay.
want to have social distance of 1.5 meters, you need to remove desks or close desks. Take
All
away
right,
chairs,
absolutely.
take away screens. That's a new
Correct.
capacity, and that's typically around 50% of the, let's say, traditional capacity. And you adjust all your
Correct.
workplace analytics based on that. So the capacity just decreases. If you measure occupancy, the maximum is, let's say, the 50% of the original capacity.
All right. Okay. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
So that's exactly how even pre-COVID eras we looked at how space is being utilized. I think we use our badges of how people are coming in, using the space itself, and the space was primarily designed around the way that people actually used, not based on the counts of people, right? Post-COVID is very similar in the nature of identifying capacity against people coming in and redefining how much is allowed and how much is not allowed in the physical environment. And that is primarily through a technology platform that we can restrict, as Sanders was telling.
All right. Okay. All right. Now, this next question is it's being addressed to everyone. The question says, again, it's on automation and technology. It says, what type and how much percentage of automation can we see the construction industry, particularly the real estate sector, adapting and moving on to from going forward from here on? Anyone who would like to take this particularly?
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Now after you, Devin.
all right. So, in terms of the project delivery, I foresee a lot of technology implementation because we would be maintaining social distances at sites as well. We'll see a lot of modularity in construction, off-site, works happening, so that there are minimum human force available at the site. We'll also see that a lot of IoT being used. We'll see 3D printing possibly coming into play. So I think we in India, we are quite far behind in terms of adopting to technology. This would trigger off because there would be a shortage of labor. The reverse migration would force us to think and invest in technology. That's the only option right now.
Yeah, maybe I want to add like 30 seconds to that. There is no alternative. So, like Deben said in the beginning, it's about survival quickest. It's about optimism and courage. And right now, it's not about an ROI, not a return on investment, but it's really about the risk of inertia.
Okay.
So what happens if you do nothing? If you don't have technology in place, for instance, it's just not going to work. So it's not an if question. This is a boundary condition to go back to safely.
Absolutely.
Let me add to that from an architect's perspective, and I'll pick up from what they've been left. And then there are two aspects to this technology. One is technology for the implementation of the projects in terms of construction industry and the interior industry. And that pace is going to go up because we are standing on a kind of situation where a lot of construction is at a standstill in the country because of the lack of labors today. The developers have commitment towards the client, and those agreements are very strict, enforceable agreements. Yes, we are through a pandemic, force majeure, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, the businesses have to move on. So we do see a migration from that perspective, from a developer's thought process also, to start implementing technology of different kinds and therefore different adaptation of products in the construction as well as interior industry. And coming from the Sanders viewpoint, once we talk about the work environment, as we said, and as Rajat also mentioned, starting right from integrating the backbone of the building to ease the management of the facility, and therefore looking at the part of technology differently, remote management, remote access, remote controlling of the real estate, and then going into various technology aspects of the interiors in the life cycle of the interiors. So technology is going to just go deeper by this whole situation.
Absolutely, yeah. And the rate which it's changed, like I guess pre-March and post-March. It's like phenomenal in itself. Now we'll just take this one last question. It's a two-part question. One is on the geographical shifts that we are foreseeing. This is probably Deven, you could take, Rajat could take. So the first part of the question says, in geographical shifts of are we foreseeing any geographical shifts in offices from dense locations like Bombay or Hyderabad, etc., to relatively leaner locations? What impact would this have on the real estate? And the second part is probably Praveen, you could take it, or like even Sanders could take it. It asks, what are some of the key priority measures and steps? In what order are these being taken by the companies to fight the COVID containment and the prevention in offices? So what has been your topmost priority, and how it's being panned out from there? So the first part being the real estate part, which is about the shift in geographical location, and second part is the priority of measures that are being implemented in workspaces. So any of y'all can take this. The last question that we take.
If I can answer that very quickly, and then Rajat can give his views. I think we would see emergence of neighborhood offices. There'll be hub and spoke model. We still have the major population of India relies on public transport, and with social distancing in place, you can't. Cities like Bombay, where you don't even have a 6 millimeter distance between two. How do you expect people to have a 6 feet distance between them? So I think
absolutely, absolutely, actually, yeah.
The challenges around will look at sort of a hub and spoke model where you'll have a lot of neighborhood offices or second home offices, if you may call those. People would not have to travel, for longer period of time at the, more than a couple of kilometers of distance. You'll have the smaller offices; they can go there, work and come back. Because whatever the situation is, the work from home, we've been advocating that it's become a successful model. But you think of the challenges people would have at home. You'll have, in a 2-bedroom flat, if you have 4 people working, in different organizations, how will you, create that infrastructure? How will you have, data infrastructure in place, or, even finding a proper ergonomic workstation and a chair? So I think the neighborhood offices would be something which the organizations would look at, and decentralization.
So just to add to it,
okay.
I think
I guess I just
yeah, I think Deven has already articulated this about the neighborhood offices and the neighborhood office districts coming up, right, to reduce travel time and therefore reduce exposure. Now, look, when you talk of geographical spread to less populated cities, I think the drivers that we have seen, where we have had offices come up in tier 2 locations, typically, and instead of tier 1 locations, have been mostly around cost of business operations and availability of local talent pool, depending on the type of business. Now, this is going to get added on as a driver, but I don't think so. It is going to drive, on its own, a shift from a major city or the 7 major cities to a tier 2 city. Yes, there will be some changes and rearrangements how we have commercial office districts within a city, and that's what Deven has spoken of. But to expect that now everybody will start moving to tier 2 cities, that's not going to happen.
Correct. All right. Okay. Anyone wants to just tap in on the second part of the questions? Or Sander, you have something?
Yeah, definitely. So about prioritization, I think
absolutely, yes.
Speed is of the essence now, and it really, if you want to go back to the office safely, I think 2 things are important. The first one is to calculate, let's say, a new capacity of the office. So what floors can I need to change, or what desks do I need to close? Second one is, how do I manage people to get back to the office safely? And that is, we developed a product, we launched it together with Wipro in India. It's called Office Shifts, and it allows people to check in to the office. And If you're talking about quick solutions, there's no hardware involved or anything like that. That would be my advice to prioritize.
All right. Okay. Anyone else wants to contribute anything? The last bit of it or something?
See, I think there'll be a lot more thought process in the workforce strategy itself, right? While we have several multi-generation of a workforce.
Correct.
The point:
yes.
How do you really identify one is the work components and elements of it, but the workforce strategy, because talent, the war for talent will still continue, whether it's physical or work remotely. So that will continue, but I think the fundamental piece will be giving that flexibility to the employees. The way that choose work will be a key component of how employees choose organization or preferred organization to work for. And cultural connections are going to become important, and along with social and emotional connections. So that is something that all of the organizations really need to think through in depth of how they're going to create this environment to be successful going forward.
Absolutely. Totally agree on that.
Add a perspective here, and then when I was talking about revisiting, and Devan had asked the question about new framework of how do we look at planning. And when I talked about that, this framework would start at relooking at the organization visions for the future, then diving into the cultural and values part of it, and then also coming to the business location. Because when you talk about office of the future, and this is a part of how we look at it, is a short and a medium term and a long term strategy. And this particular question which you're asking for locations is a part of mid to long term strategies for organizations who are looking at investments and setting up projects for future. So when we talk about business locations, besides the talent mapping, using GIS tools to map the talents, geographical areas, etc. And yes, questions are going to be kept on the table, and this will be answered differently in different geographies. In Bangalore, in Pune, in Delhi, in Mumbai, it will be answered differently. Whether I do a centralized location or maybe I move to a satellite spoke and hub model, as Devan mentioned about, it will be answered differently when you put a question from a New York perspective or a Chicago or a Boston perspective. So each geography will answer these questions very differently, and therefore. And this also links back to the company's vision and the strategies going into future, because as designers we see a fundamental change which is going to creep in there, and each and every organization from those perspectives of vision for the future, and then starting seeing the visions from a real estate lens, and all these questions will come up as step-by-step answers. So yes, from a perspective, this will affect and organize, and we as architects and interior designers will have to dive into these questions.
Correct. Absolutely. Now, with this, we'll wrap in our webinar, gentlemen. There are still quite some questions, actually, we've left untouched. I'm really sorry. We've been running out of time. We've already crossed our 1 hour mark. But what we can do is I could, with the permissions of the speakers, I could probably share these questions with you all. If you all can probably get back with us with your thoughts on it, it would be really great. And thank you so much, Devan, for so beautifully taking this up and directing the entire panel discussion, touching upon every aspect of workspace planning, DCM, strategies, future of work. You've literally taken the score out here. Sanders, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Netherlands. Bimal, thank you. You've been there on behalf of the architects community, and I think the major workloads coming, changing the space that you're in. Rajat was there. I think he had to unfortunately go on. Praveen, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we couldn't have you on the video, but thank you so much for sharing all your insights with us. Thank you so much, gentlemen. With this, we'll end the session here. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.